Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra Goel. And as we are getting closer and closer to the examination, certain concepts that are in news or certain events are in news are something that are now follow-up stories, alright, from events when they were actually taking place. For example, when we started the series, one of the first news that we discussed was elections in Myanmar. But now things have changed dramatically in Myanmar, and the situation is now really volatile. So that is a follow-up story. If you already had known about the elections, the story that is unfolding now would not be difficult, alright, to understand. Similarly, today we will be covering a news about missile strikes on Saudi Aramco by Houthi rebels. Alright, Houthi rebels is a group that was designated as terrorist. Joe Biden revoked it. So it's a story that had developed way back in January last week. Alright, so now we will keep on seeing news as you get closer and closer to the examination, and these stories are a chance for you to now revise what you have covered previously. Alright, now whenever we are doing certain stories, most of them you will realize are follow-ups to what we had already discussed. And that does not mean new things will not emerge, alright? Don't believe that nothing new will happen. So you have to link the new things and the old ones. The old ones are your chance to revise the original story along with it, alright? So make sure whenever you study a news story that is related to something we had covered previously, we will definitely highlight it when we covered it. We will link it in the description box where you can find it, and at the same time the onus is on you to ensure that you are doing your revision of those things all together, so those concepts remain ingrained in your brains. Alright, on that note, with doubts from yesterday's video, one concept for which a lot of you had doubts was about anti-dumping tax. Alright, now what is anti-dumping, or what is dumping? What is dump? Dump is trash, right? You believe that this is something extra, something you don't need, so you dump it. Alright, you have storerooms in your household, you have garages, or sometimes you do use municipality dump yards to dump your waste. Dumping is a concept in trade. It happens when a country, there are usually always two countries involved in dumping. One country who manufactures the goods, the other who receives the goods, alright? When you provide or sell off certain goods, you receive certain price, but when the seller decides to sell the commodity less than his cost price, the price at which he produces, or the price at which something is being sold in the market. So right now petrol in India is being sold for 100 rupees. Let's say Kushagra Goel is a new entrant in the market. Kushagra Goel petrol pumps open up and they are selling petrol for 50 rupees. Alright, I am suffering damages, but I am providing petrol at a relief. That would be dumping. When you sell goods in another country less than the cost price and less than the price of the commodity in that particular country, that is known as dumping. So the concept is, when you sell a commodity, the manufacturer sells a commodity in another country at a price less than the cost price and the price at which the commodity is selling in the country that is importing the good, that is known as dumping. Anti-dumping means, or anti-dumping tax is the tax that is imposed on those commodities which are selling at a lower price. So the tax is equivalent to the gap in the cost price and the actual selling price of the commodity. Alright, so that gap is what is anti-dumping. To prevent countries from indulging in unprofessional or unreasonable trade practices, illegal trade practices, anti-dumping is one such measure. Alright, so that is one thing. Another doubt that certain students also had was about ghost hectares that are there when we discuss the editorial about Britain. Ghost hectares is those concept. So when British people colonized America, that was known as the New World, that place was very large tract of land, alright, and it was very sparsely populated by tribal people. All right, there was no concept of surplus that the tribals produced. All right, so ghost hectares was those free lands that were fertile enough to produce agriculture, which were not being used by the inhabitants or the Aborigines tribals, the Red Indians who inhabited America. So the Europeans came, colonized those lands. Those were ghost hectares that they colonized. Another doubt was about privatization and government expenditure, that how can privatization and government expenditure go hand in hand, or when government spends, how will it increase private expenditure? When government spends, it means it is trying to push confidence in the market that produce can sell for a higher price, or that the economy will give you returns. Therefore, government spend more, or in crisis government is asked to spend more, because when government is spending more, there is hope that the market will rise, and therefore private persons will participate in the market too. All right, now that is something that is not happening in India, and that is what we have to wait and watch. That is a policy statement and a realm of speculation. All right, on that note, we will begin with today's newspaper. So on the front page, you see two updates. One is from 20 from Myanmar seek refuge in India. What is now herein becomes the concept that is relevant for you all to understand. What is refugee? Refugee are those people who escape their home country in terms of saving their lives, or when they feel that in the home country to which they belong, their life is under threat. When people migrate from one country to another to save their lives, or because there is a threat to their lives, that is known as refugee. All right. So as more and more protests take place in Myanmar and clamped down by military, people from Myanmar are escaping to save their lives. 20 such individuals have asked for refuge in India. All right. So as of right now, the concept of refugee becomes important to understand. The second thing on the front page, OTT platforms will not have to register with the central government. So there is more and more clarifications coming in about this structure, that is the new ethics rule of 2021 on intermediaries and OTT platform that have been imposed. All right, and how they apply. So keep making notes about what the government clarifies about them. All right, so what are the things they have to do? A 3-tier structure, something we discussed previously, that a grievance cell, second a self-regulatory body of OTT, and third an inter-ministerial panel to look into complaints. Government has clarified it will not appoint its own people at the inter-ministerial, at this self-regulatory body. And along with this, OTT platforms now have to self-classify the content. All right, they will classify the content themselves. So right now there is no clarity whether they have to get it approved by censor board or not. That is something that has not happened yet. Because why is this confusion there? Because the government and the courts have asked these platforms to come on the level playing field as movies and other TV shows. So TV shows and movies have to have certification. OTT platforms did not. Now they have been asked to self-certify. All right. Then moving on the political side, nothing of real note. On the front page, new rankings by the QS. All right. QS World University Rankings have been released, and within this, under engineering category and overall, Indian universities have had a drop. All right, certain universities have taken a huge fall in their rankings. All right, so the top 3 in engineering category in India are now IIT Bombay, Delhi and Madras. IIT Kanpur and Kharagpur have dropped out. Similarly, under human sciences or economy, or Delhi University has taken a hit of 48 places. All right. So the QS World Rankings are something that identify universities in different categories: history, human science, anthropology, engineering, medical and life sciences. So AIIMS Delhi is under medical and life sciences. All right. So you have to make a note about the universities that have featured on the list. All right. 2 new entrants, that is Jawaharlal Nehru University's anthropological course and OP Jindal University's law program has entered the world ranking. for 2020. All right. Then moving on the other news. On national front, nothing of real note, as more and more political news. On the editorial front, all right. On the editorial front, on the left hand side, we have news about clearing a low bar. This is in response to the spectrum sales that took place and the auction of different megahertz spectrums of airwaves. All right, these are assets of the country. The criticism is that the government placed the one band that was the most important, that is 700 megahertz band, at the premium price, and that is one that went unsold. Because it went unsold, that means customers will not get the best service in India in comparison to their other peers across the globe. So this is something that the government should be doing to ensure better services. All right. Specific details about these policies are not our concern. Therefore, we can skip them. All right. The second one, efficacious 2. This is about vaccine efficacy of the Covaxin and how it is of higher efficacy than the Covishield. And now that hesitancy about Covaxin should reduce, because until now only 1/3 people were receiving Covaxin instead of in comparison to Covishield. Now the editorial talks about two things. One, that Covaxin's uptake should rise, and secondly, the government should change the standard of approval for Covaxin for emergency critical use to emergency use or even higher. All right. Then the main editorial, not so stellar in protecting personal liberty. This is talking about Article 21 and the right to personal liberty, that the courts have a mandate in the constitution to protect personal liberty. However, the courts are not doing so, is what the editorial talks about, with different cases of how we retain criminal defamation as a crime that can restrict personal liberty, and the law of sedition, which is a colonial law which is still being implemented in India. So it is calling for revocation of both these laws and how they are not in consonance with personal liberty concept. All right. Then moving on, with Biden, India may need a new template. This is speculative about how India can avoid different sanctions, how it can improve its decision making. There is bipartisan support for India. These policy speculations not relevant. Only thing that is relevant is the CAATSA, or Countering America's Adversary Through Sanctions Act, for the S-400 missile system. We have discussed the S-400 missile system and the CAATSA previously also. That is the only thing that you need to be aware of in this entire editorial. All of the other things are merely speculations about what can take place in foreign policy. All right. Then moving on the op-ed. One is about political analysis of elections in Bengal. The cartoon is also about that. The main thing that we need to be aware of is ending the war in Yemen. All right. So this is talking about the two sides on war in Yemen. One are the Houthi rebels who want to capture the country, and is Saudi Arabia, who is backing the government there and does not want Houthis to be in power in Yemen. All right. Now, the editorial states that one, Houthis should give up fight and democratically govern the country if they want to take up power. The Saudis should withdraw from the country and impose a ceasefire so that hostilities end, because the war is unending. There is no solution in sight and people are suffering. All right. The designation of Houthi rebels is something we had seen and discussed previously. I will provide a link to that in the description box also, and how it is important to the overall geopolitical situation in Middle East. All right. A similar or a related news to this is also on the international page, that is we will be talking about. All right. So within this, that is the two sides, that is what we need to know and what the editorial is calling for. All right. Then moving on the national news, there is one thing that we need to be abreast with. Recently, Haryana passed a law wherein now private companies have to provide 75% employment to localites in the state of Haryana. This is something that has irked the corporations and trade bodies in India. as you know, Haryana is a place where a lot of MNC factories are located. For example, Maruti Suzuki's plant in and in Gurgaon or Gurugram and extension areas of Gurugram, all those places are vastly international in the sense that companies that work there, outsourcing all the businesses. So this is something that different trade bodies have highlighted will reduce or spell disaster for the state's economy, and that it will move, foreign investment will move to other states. Alright, so the law is that now 75% seats or working reservation is to be provided to people from Haryana only. Alright, so that is the standard that the government has put in, and trade bodies are asking for reconsideration of this decision. Alright, then moving on, government of ministers or group of ministers suggests step to stem negative narrative. Now within this, GOMs or group of ministers are informal bodies. Alright, so one, we have portfolios to different council of ministers, and along with that we can have GOMs. This is an innovation of parliamentary system. It is not a constitutional concept. So these are bodies of different ministers. One of this, which included ministers about from information technology, women and child development, information and broadcasting, external affairs minister, minority affairs minister, sports minister and urban development, and Minister of State of Finance Anurag Thakur were part of this. They in their GOM had talked about how these platforms and regulation of media should take place, and the list here is provided that 1, ministries should do an outreach program, 2, they should do engagement with future journalists to tap into them, 3rd, curb fake news, 4, identify pool of spin doctors who use better presentation of facts, alright, to improve the positioning of the government and reduce overall negativity against the government. Second last, promoting and supporting online portals to counter existing critical news portals. If there is criticism of the government of India should support those newspapers or influencers or news portals which are promoting the actions of the government, and have regular interaction with media journalists of foreign to disseminate government perspective. So overall increase the image of the government of India and its policies. This is now being seen in terms of reducing criticism or having coordinated journalism. Alright, so that is something and it is presumed that the new ethics code was part of this. However, from constitution's perspective, what you need to know is GOMs are not a constitutional body. They are a group of council of ministers who have been designated or collective people have been designated one mandate, or you could call a umbrella portfolio. Alright, so that is an innovation of parliamentary system that we need to know. If this becomes a bigger controversy or something specific, we will cover that in more details. Alright, then moving on the national news, there are two important things. One is that about the index of livable cities. In that, in larger cities, population above 1 million, it is Bangalore that has come out on high, and in smaller cities it is Shimla who has come out. Alright, so this is part of ease of living index in 2020. In municipalities, it is Indore's municipality that have been given the highest rank. Alright, so these things within this editorial, the ranking who has gotten first in which category becomes important. Bangalore in bigger cities, Shimla in smaller cities, and Indore in terms of municipality that is considered most efficient. This is about Ease of Living Index 2020 released by Union Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry. Ease of Living Index. Hardeep Puri is the minister in charge of this. Alright. Then on the left hand side there is news. India wants Chahbahar port in key corridor. Chahbahar port is something that is of real note that we need to highlight. It is the port that India has developed in Iran. Alright. Now there is talks of India wanting to link it to the INSTC trade corridor. Alright. So this is something that India is proposing to improve in the eastern corridor of the INSTC, which is the International North-South Transport Corridor. It links Iran's or the Chahbahar port up to Russia. Alright, it is a way for India to access Central Asian countries, because we don't have better relations with China and Pakistan, who border these regions. So to bypass that route, we have INSTC, and the Chahbahar port is considered our gateway to Central Asia. Iran, Afghanistan, other Central Asian countries are linked to the Chahbahar port. Alright, so the Chahbahar port is something that is of real relevance for all of us, alright, in general knowledge. Then on the international front, more about protests in Myanmar, nothing of real note. On the left hand side, Yemen's Houthi claim missile strike on an oil plant. Alright, so extraterrestrial or border strikes on by the Houthi rebels on Saudi Arabia. It is Saudi Arabia that had attacked and asked US support for the war in Yemen. And it is in this light that the main editorial had talked about the one of ending hostilities between Yemen and Saudi Arabia, which is specifically the Houthis and the Saudi government. Alright, so the missile used facility in Jeddah, Quds 2 missile. Alright, so that is something, what happens in these hostilities is something we have to keep an eye on. Alright, now basically this is a regional conflict. Saudis do not want the Houthis to take place because they have external support from Iran. Alright, then on the sporting front, Kieran Pollard became the third player after Herschel Gibbs and Yuvraj Singh to score 6 sixes in an over in a T20 match between West Indies and Sri Lanka. Within the same match, Dhananjaya De Silva also bagged a hat-trick. He was the fourth Sri Lankan to do so. Alright, so here is list of people who did it, 6 sixes in an over. In T20, it is Kieran Pollard and Herschel Gibbs and Yuvraj Singh who have done so. Alright, apart from that, nothing of real note in the newspaper. It becomes, in certain days, editorials are not important, other news becomes important. Alright, so for example, in today's newspaper, the details about the ethics code, the details about refugees and what is the concept of refugees becomes important, and the conflict between Saudi and Yemen, and the ease of living index rankings and the university world rankings become important. So 2 in static GK, ease of living index and QS world rankings, and in other international news, Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Those are the things that you need to be aware of. On that note, thank you so much. If you like the work that we do, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, do subscribe to it. Thank you.